and today I am going to walk you through all of the steps that you need to know so that you can make this adorable bag that has the shape of pencils on the front. Now let's jump into that tutorial. Before jumping into the details of this tutorial, just have a look in the description down below, and I will have a link there to a blog post where I have written all of the measurements and anything else that you might need to know about sewing this quilted pencil bag. The first thing we are going to do is cut out all of our fabric pieces. You will need 3 pieces of fabric, one for your backing of your bag and then 2 for the inner lining. They will all be cut at 17.5 inches by 19 inches. Then cut out 2 pieces of batting a little bit larger than that. Next, you will need 2 pieces of fabric cut at 6 inches by 17.5 inches. They will be for your pencil points as well as for the back panel behind your pencil points. Then cut out 5 pieces of fabric at 4 inches by 14 inches, and they will form the base of your pencil. Lastly, cut out 2 pieces of fabric at 3.5 inches by 22 inches, and that will be for the handles. 2 items that are helpful but not vital in making this bag would be my sewing gauge as well as some double-sided fusible. I will link to both of those down below as well. And now it's time to start putting this bag together. So the first thing we're going to do is work on our lining. So lay both pieces of your lining fabric right sides together, and then it's time to pin around all 3 edges, making sure that one of the short ends is left unpinned. Next, mark a 3 to 4 inch opening on one of the sides of the lining. I like to do this with a different type of pin, and we will leave this section unsewn as this is where we will be turning the entire project right side out. Now it's time to take a quilter's ruler and mark a square on both bottom corners, 2 inches by 2 inches. You can use whatever ruler you have handy, as well as a water-soluble marker. Then grab your fabric scissors and just cut away both of those squares. Now it's time to take our lining to our sewing machine and sew a seam, doing a back stitch from the top down to our marked pinned section, leaving that space open, and then sewing down to our bottom corner. And then sew across the bottom and across the opposite side. Leave both of the square sections open. Now it's time to create our 3D corners. So take those squares that we left open and just match up those outer edge seams and pin across that edge. Do that for both sides. Take it back to your sewing machine and sew another seam across there. It will be a 1/2 inch seam. Once you have created that boxed corner or that 3D corner on both ends, then just take some fabric scissors and cut away a little bit of the extra bulk. Try not to get too close to your seam, but it's just nice to trim away a little bit of that excess fabric. And the last step for this lining is to just take the lining to your iron and press open those seams. Now it's time to put our pencils together. So grab all 5 pieces of fabric that you cut out, place them in the order that you think they look best, and then start pinning them all together. All of these will be sewn together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once all 5 pieces have been sewn together, then take it to your iron and press open all of those seams. Now we are going to focus on our pencil tips. Now if you are using double-sided fusible, this is where you will add the double-sided fusible to the back of this piece of fabric. However, I do want you to know that the double-sided fusible is not absolutely necessary for this project. I have made this bag with and without the double-sided fusible. Then take that panel and lay it right sides together on top of the section that we just created for the pencil base. Now as you can see, my fabric's a little bit shiny here, and that's because I pulled off the backing of my double-sided fusible, and I did that way too early. Do not do that. I learned my lesson. It made it way too hard to sew across. So keep the paper backing on your double-sided fusible at this point, and then pin across that one edge, take it to your sewing machine, and sew a 1/2 inch seam across the top. Now it's time to fold open that panel. Grab yourself your water-soluble marker again and a ruler, and we are going to mark the center of each pencil up 4 inches. And then just make a mark, and that will be for your pencil tip. And then you'll be able to draw a line from the outer edge of your pencil to your pencil tip all the way across this panel, creating 5 pencil tips in total. Then we are going to take this to our sewing machine and we are going to do a very small zigzag stitch along all of these lines. Now, since I'm working with white fabric for my pencil tips, I should have made sure that my seam behind the white fabric was facing downwards. I did not do that, so later you will actually see a small white seam in behind the pencil tips, which is not the end of the world, but if you can avoid it, I would suggest that you do so. And now, of course, is the right time to finally take off the backing of our double-sided fusible. Then grab some scissors and just cut along the outer edge of those zigzagged seams. This, of course, will create our pencil tips. Then, once you've peeled off that backing, fold your pencil tips down, grab your second panel that's going to go behind your pencil tips, lay it right sides facing down, pin across that top, and then sew a 1/2 inch seam across that section. It is at this point, if you did use double-sided fusible, that you will want to continue following your double-sided fusible's instructions and finish sealing the double-sided fusible to that back piece of fabric. Then take it back to your sewing machine and sew a straight stitch along all of your pencil tips, attaching them to that backing fabric. Then it will be time to quilt this top piece to our batting. So take your pencil panel and lay it on top of your batting, which you should have cut just a little bit larger than 17.5 by 19 inches. Grab your water-soluble marker and a ruler and make a mark from the base of that pencil tip to the top of your panel. And then use your ruler or a measuring gauge to measure from the tip of the pencil down 1 inch, and do that for all 5 pencil tips. And grab a bunch of pins and start pinning the entire panel to the batting. I used a lot of pins to make sure that my panel did not shift around a lot. And now it's time to attach our panel to our batting. So start in between one of your pencil seams and you're going to sew stitch in the ditch all the way up to the top, following the line that we marked between the 2 pencil tips, and sew all the way to the top of the panel. Do this between each pencil, and you do not need to worry about backstitching at this point. Then remove the pins and just trim away the excess batting. And now it's time to hand sew our pencil tips to our pencils. For myself, I got so excited I attached my panels together before I did this, so please ignore my error. As far as what thread to use, I would suggest using an embroidery thread or a thicker cotton thread. For myself, I chose this metallic thread, which I thought would be a fun silver colored pencil. Now, a little trick that I like to use to get a thicker thread through the eye of a needle is I actually fold it over the needle itself, pinch it tight, and then I'm able to wiggle it through the eye of the needle. Then match up both ends of your thread, tie a knot, and you are ready to sew your pencil tips. To hand sew your pencil tips, just start at the base, that 1 inch marking that we made, and move your way up until you get to the point of the pencil tip. Then finish with a knot and do this for all 5 pencil tips. Alright, so put our front panel aside and we are going to move on to our back panel. So just take that piece of fabric that you cut at 7.5 by 19 inches, lay it on top of your batting that you cut just a little bit larger than that, pin the 2 pieces together so that the fabric does not shift around, and then it will be time for us to quilt a whole bunch of lines across this fabric. So what I did was I took it to my sewing machine, I put it alongside my sewing foot, alongside the edge of the fabric, and I sewed 1 seam. Once I did that, then I was able to follow that seam with my sewing foot, and I continued all the way down the line until the entire panel was sewn to the back of the batting. As you go along, the one side may start feeling a little bit bulky within your sewing machine. You can just fold that in and pin it so it's just a little bit easier for you to sew those straight lines. Then grab your quilter's ruler and trim along your fabric to cut away all of that excess batting. Then grab both finished panels and lay them right sides together, and we are essentially going to do the same thing that we did to our lining fabric, except we don't need to leave that marked 3 to 4 inch opening. Grab your ruler and mark 2 inches by 2 inches on both bottom corners, cut away those squares, and then sew a 1/2 inch seam along both sides as well as the bottom, leaving those square sections unsewn. Then, again, the same way we did with the lining, match up our seams on those open squares, pin it, sew a 1/2 inch seam across, and then trim away any excess fabric. And now it's finally time to move on to our handles. So grab the 2 pieces of fabric that you cut at 22 inches by 3.5 inches, bring it to your iron and fold it in half ironing a crease down the center of your piece of fabric. Once you've done that, then take both outer edges and fold them in towards that center crease, ironing them again. Then you can fold your entire piece in half, pin across that outer edge, and bring it over to your sewing machine. To sew your straps together, just sew 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in between there, along both outer edges of your strap. Do this for both straps. And now it's time to mark where we want our handles to lay on our bag. So just measure from the outer edge 4.5 inches in. Mark that with a water-soluble marker, and then lay your handle face down on your fabric at that marked point. And leave about 1/2 an inch of your handle past the outer edge of your pouch. Do this for both sides of your handle and on both sides of your bag. Then turn the outer side of your bag inside out, and then you can tuck your lining right side out into that. So both of the right sides of your fabric will be facing each other. Then match up both side seams and pin around the entire top. Now you can bring your bag to your sewing machine. I like to take my little removable arm off of my sewing machine for this part. It just makes it a little easier. And then you can sew a 1/4 inch seam around the entire top edge, making sure to reinforce where the handles are. So I just go back and forth over the handles, and then I continue forward, going all the way around. And of course, don't forget to backstitch. And now it's time to turn the entire project right side out, so reach inside that hole that we left in our lining and pull the entire project right side out. It is at this point that I like to reach on in with my handy dandy chopstick, and I just push out the points a little bit to make them nice and crisp, of course being careful not to push too hard. And then it's time to grab that opening in the lining, pin it shut, bring it to the sewing machine, and sew a quick seam across that edge. Then tuck your lining inside the outer pouch, bring it to your iron, and just press around that top seam, clipping it so that it cools in place. Then take it back to your sewing machine, and we are going to sew around the entire top with another 1/4 inch seam. Don't forget to start with your back stitch, and when you come to your straps, it is still a good idea to reinforce them again by going back and forth one more time over each strap. And of course, finish with a back stitch. And that, my friends, is everything that you need to know so that you can make your very own bag with pencils on the front. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it that thumbs up, as it really does help YouTube know that it's a good tutorial to share to others. Please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, so that you don't miss future tutorials. And as always, I hope that you have a wonderful day and a fantastic summer as we seem to be heading in that direction. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.